Okay. Well, welcome to our Right to the City Alliance Stewardship Working Group and Peer Learning session. So today we're so excited to have our friend Dre with Justice for the People in Denver, Colorado, just to share a little about her story and journey, and a little bit about her work, current challenges, and what we can learn. And again, we'll let Dre share whatever you want to share along the way, and then we'll just jump in with questions from everyone who's here.
Awesome. I'm gonna share this presentation. But yeah, if folks have questions throughout, definitely let me know. I had to, I was part of this cooperative leaders and scholars fellowship that I highly recommend. It's national. It's hosted by the Colorado Development Foundation, sorry, Cooperative Development Foundation. I think they're based in California, but yeah, it was so life-changing to be honest. So I had to do a presentation for my capstone. So that's what I'm going to share. Um, okay. Okay. And all these pictures are from like different mobile home park campaigns throughout the last 10 years. So this presentation uh, is like really to be able to walk a community through what it takes to be resident owned beyond acquisition. Like I've done a lot of work for like pre-acquisition or like making sure that tenant or mobile home residents know their rights. But this is more for like after communities already acquired, which makes sense for this group. And then also just to show allies and partners why post-acquisition funds and resources are so important and like how difficult the post process is. Um, I think a lot of you guys already know why mobile homes are important. But yeah, in 2020, which was around when we started being able to record park sales because of different compliance laws statewide, only 9% of the 69 parks sold in Colorado were purchased by residents. That's pretty common, that not many parks are owned by residents. And then yeah, uh in the metro area, there's a ton of mobile home parks, but also in the ski towns and expensive mountain towns like Aspen. That's like sometimes the only worker housing, especially in touristy places that depend on hospitality workers. Um, and like really the two threats, biggest threats are uh, corporate ownership and mass displacement, which I would say corporate ownership still causes evictions because they tend to increase the rents in like a lot of our states that rent control is illegal. Um, and yeah, there was a park recently I heard of, I think in Gunnison, that they raised it 100% as soon as they got in. So yeah, so that's pretty common. And then some of the big ones some of these are based in Colorado, but RV Horizons impact communities, yes, communities, Haven Park, Essentia, Equity Lifestyle, Sun Communities, and RHP properties. We have a class action against RHP properties. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of them are in your states as well. This is just about the law that we have that has led to resident ownership. And I think, yeah, I think I've shared the statute in the past, but if folks are looking to run policies like this for tenants or mobile home residents, like you can just copy and paste this law because it's pretty it's pretty strong. Like it's not perfect. There's 120 days is not like enough time, but yeah, like there's always a threat that if it's too much time that residents have before the owner can sell to an outside buyer, it could be considered a taking. And so yeah, so that's kind of the timeline. Um, so Rock USA is the biggest financer of mobile home parks that they finance mobile home parks that transition into resident ownership. But there's a few challenges with Rock is like they don't have the capacity to purchase every park that goes up for sale. Like sometimes there's like a dozen parks at one time that go up for sale. The model doesn't fit the needs of every community as a very specific model where people don't have any equity in the land, but they can sell their home. And I was surprised to find that their lending, their underwriter is just as risk averse as mainstream loans. So there's just parks that they've assessed as too risky and like haven't been part of the financing. And yeah, this model was originated in New Hampshire with mostly retired white communities, and the parks that we're working with are largely like immigrant families with kids. I also like kind of like another problem I'm trying to solve is like we've had a lot of conflict in Montevista Mobile Home Park in Denver that is transitioning to resident ownership. And just like, a lot of conflict that's just really menial, like it's not significant. And I'm trying to help switch their focus on like what we need to do to transition to resident ownership, like because they're under interim ownership right now, and kind of like help just give the bigger picture why some of these conflicts are not important and we need to like, get over them and like get through them. Um, these are the three parks we're working in. Montevista, 3 Mile, these two parks are in the same situation where they're bought by nonprofits and they're transitioning to resident ownership in the next like 2-ish years, 1 to 3 years. Um, 3 Mile is in Garfield County, which is in the mountains. And then we're working in another park in Clear Creek County, which is also a like rural mountain town. And just so folks can kind of understand like how like us as a law firm like that organizes like connects to resident ownership. We have a class action against the previous owner and the current owner of this park because they violated the opportunity purchase law, among other things. They also like are just doing a lot of shady things around maintenance and getting people to sign things saying that they're not going to sue their landlord and things like that. So basically we're leveraging a lawsuit to force the owners to sell to the residents as part of negotiation. So like, yeah, if you don't sell to the residents, we're going to continue with this lawsuit and you're going to be screwed. So you might as well like, get your shit together and like be serious about negotiations. And yeah, like, and Susan, I was thinking maybe we should connect. In general, I'd love to have a one-on-one with you, but I know that Mountainside Estates is up for sale, and I know you guys have been working there. So if
But
you,
yeah, I was just gonna ask you, like, is that the suit you have against RHP?
we have one in Fort Collins.
Oh,
Um,
so it's not the one you were just talking about.
RHP, yeah.
No, this class action suit you said because they're like trying to not do
Oh,
maintenance and
no,
force
this is
people.
Lawson and like that's the name of the park, but I think it's owned by like kind of a small, I mean, I don't know, just a shady like LLC, but it's not our
Right. It's
property.
not an RHP. Yes, I'd love to hear what your class action suit to RHP is.
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, we should connect offline. Um, cool. And then yeah, like, cooperative structures are not for every community, but there are a lot of important benefits like around permanence, affordability, and governance. And I think the difference between community ownership versus community controlled are two different things. So like, community land trust where the land is owned by a nonprofit in perpetuity, like tend to have a structure where there's a lot of resident control, even though they don't technically own the land, like without the nonprofit. But yeah, so and like I would say this is more geared towards a limited equity cooperative where you can't just like profit indiscriminately. This is like a limited equity cooperative actually keeps rent affordable. But yeah, something to consider is responsibilities of landlord will be in the hands of residents, which can be a really big responsibility, especially for working class residents working like, several jobs. And then, so something I learned through this fellowship that I did was around the global cooperative community. I did not know that there's like 7 international principles that have been agreed upon by like globally, that sometimes are like revised or updated. And yeah, it's just been really interesting. Like I'm gonna go to Cuba for 2 weeks. If I don't come back, it's because they didn't let me back in. That's the very thing that's going on with Trump. But it's to like study cooperatives and go to like an international cooperative conference. But yeah, it's been really amazing to learn about like how all these organizations internationally have like come together for this reason. So yeah, there's like they're represented in 105 countries. And they just like, it just runs the gambit in terms of consumer health, like housing. So these are the principles. And I just think that if you're working in a resident, like a stewarding a community to adopt these, I think they're just really strong and helpful. Having an open and voluntary membership, having democratic member control, having members like participate in uh in like different capacities, in autonomy and independence. And by self-help organizations, it doesn't mean like bootstraps mentality. It's more like self-help, like we collectively help ourselves. Um, and then having constant education, training, and information happening amongst cooperative members, cooperation among cooperatives, like having, supporting each other through these types of networks, which might sound obvious, but they're not always. Like credit unions are technically cooperatives, which I didn't know that before I did this fellowship. But yeah, so like, sometimes they work in silos, but yeah, it's important to like figure out how to support each other and maybe like outside of like mainstream capitalist companies and structures. And then yeah, like creating policies that are supported by the membership. So collective governance. So creating a resident association or resident tenant union. And like just so you know, this like presentation is also like to train people how to train people, like train a trainer. So you can use this in communities when you're kind of figuring out to how to create the structures and foundation for resident ownership. So you just need to have a resident association. So this just goes through like benefits of that, which like I think are just obvious to a lot of us. And then like, yeah, the steps you kind of have to do is like electing a resident board, creating articles of incorporation to file with the state. And like we have templates of all these things. People can just like update them and copy and paste. Creating bylaws are really important. And like bylaws determine some of these things, like who gets to vote, who can be part of the association, how often will meetings be, like what's quorum look like, how many people you like can be on the board, what powers will the board have, things like that. But yeah, I mean, my organizing model is I set up a resident board in every single community I work with, regardless if they're gonna come under resident ownership. Because that's just like, for me, it makes more sense than like expecting an organizer to have 1,000 relationships with people. Like you have to train residents to build their own relationships so that if something happens to you, they can continue onward. So yeah, leadership development must be happening constantly. So like, we know that, so like I usually build boards that are too big because there's going to be people that step back. Like sometimes right away they just like realize they don't have capacity, or like yeah, or just think along the way people have reasons why they have to step back. And then like having committees is a way to ensure that there's a constant pipeline. So for Montevista, which some of you have probably heard me say, I have a very problematic president of the board that's like really sexist, and he drives me crazy. But I've been trying to set up like a finance committee, and he feels very threatened by that. And so like that's not helpful, right? He just like wants to be in control of everything, and like it's been difficult to just like how like push him to like give up power. And like recently I told him like we need more women to be involved, and he was like, well, in Mexico, like, the men provide, I don't know, just bullshit. So anyway, so like yeah, it's just helpful to establish those spaces and get obviously buy-in from like board members as much as possible. So like there are other board members that think it's good to have committees, but yeah, so like here's some of the examples: conflict resolution, communications, mutual aid. Like, here in a lot of other places, there's promotora models that they're like resource navigators in some ways that can help connect people to like direct assistance, or like, food banks, or things like that. And then for mobile home parks specifically, I thought this was interesting. And I think in any like kind of cooperative or resident ownership, is having a committee dedicated to maintenance, not of like the infrastructure, because that is managed by the management company, but about like individual units. So like we have some elder folks living in Montevista that have like serious problems with their homes that need like insulation, or just like new electrical wiring. And so like having a committee that identifies those needs and tries to connect them to resources as much as possible, or like we're trying to get building materials donated to us by nonprofit developers. So yeah, so like that's just helpful to think about, so that people can actually stay there in dignified housing. And hopefully because their rent is going to be stabilized, they can invest more in their individual units over time. And then this is just like some ideas of where these committees could get trained. So like So for example, for the finance committee, there there's I reached out to Partner Colorado, which is a credit union, which again, they're cooperatives. That means they're nonprofits. Like they're controlled and run by consumers, which is like very unique instead of like traditional banks. So like I asked them to do a training with residents on like finances and like how to manage loans. But we also just like have like other worker cooperative organizations that can do this work for free to train up our finance committee. Yeah, there's like different communications like consultants that you could work with to like help put together a website if people need to get the skills for that. Sometimes people live in the community that already know how to do that. And then yeah, there's mutual aid. Like I said, we have a bunch of organizations that have like focus on a promotora model, which like does a lot of the mutual aid work. And then yeah, maintenance, like trainings you could probably get from nonprofit developers and like having management companies or the management company you hire train people up to help with that. And then something that like you will have to figure out as well that we're starting to put together is like the general membership structure. So what does it mean to be a member of the cooperative, knowing that not everybody will be? So like so the cooperative and like Boded Emma, like I think it's like they have like $1,000 like buy-in that they can build interest rates on, they can build interest over periods of time. Like, yeah, what do they have to do to stay current? Do they have to like, pay amount of money? Do they have to be part of a committee? What values, principles, and conduct are members agreeing to? What happens when someone leaves the association or moves out of the park? How much do people have to commit to be a shareholder? What does it mean to be a non-owner and live in the community? So again, so some of these things relate to cooperatives specifically. Some of them like you would need anyway for like a community land trust model or a different model. Operations. So the like, resident or like like the management of the community has to be trained on like either tenant law or the Mobile Home Park Act in this case, because I've seen management companies who aren't versed in this like in like unknowingly breaking laws. So like for example, residents were sent a 5-day notice of like if you don't pay your rents in 5 days, you get charged a late fee, but the law says you have 10 days. So just making sure that we're not perpetuating or violating the laws as we're trying to, create this like equitable community. So yeah, these are just examples of like the things that the Mobile Home Park Act governs. And then loan, like there's a few different phases of financing. And like I just want to be clear, this is not my wheelhouse. I'm still learning about this. And I've gotten help from the community wealth, Colorado Community Wealth Organization here on this. But yeah, like you have to like build credit. So like both of the community or one of the communities now has a bank account. And yeah, it's good to have like a community bank account ahead of time. And like again, since we're in an interim period, they have like a few years to build this credit. Being able to prove that they have like assets and can balance a budget, being able to show profit and loss that the organization has over time. What's going on? Okay, here we go. And then finance infrastructure. Yeah, like, if you can like open bank accounts with credit unions. So having a fiscal sponsor for the organization can be helpful. Most of the time, I would not recommend having an association file for 501(c)(3) status for folks who have done that. The compliance, even like the application is not very hard relative to compliance, like filing 990s, like being current with not just the federal government, but also the state and local government. It's a huge lift. Like I've almost lost their status before, and like I'm more maybe versed in this than other like folks that might be doing it for the first time. And I have a lawyer on staff who like does this, like he sets up nonprofits specifically, and we still have struggled. So having a fiscal sponsor, and there are organizations that are dedicated specifically to providing fiscal sponsorship as part of their model. So yeah, so like, and I just like foundation and collective, which is based in Colorado. I think it's, I don't think it's national. But yeah, they charge a base rate of $10,000 a year, which is like pretty hefty. So it's not always worth it for every organization. And then fiscal sponsorship and financing for loans. So something I found out recently is our biggest loan for Montevista is about 6 million, and the interest rate is 8%. And I have to find a fiscal sponsor for that specific loan because it's completely tied to the interim owner's board chair. Like, he's basically the guarantor. And so without him, they wouldn't have given us the loan. So like, it's just something like to think, and I'm still figuring out this process of like, what is it going to look like to transfer loans to the residents? Like, what do they need to do? Because every single loan we have, which is like, I think 6 different loans, they have different loan terms. And then capital accounts to track membership. I believe that has to do with, yeah, having like a separate account to track who, like if you're a cooperative structure and you have to be like given $1,000 to be a member, that has to go in a specific account that accrues interest over time. So then when someone leaves, then they get that amount back plus interest, usually. And then, sorry, I'm almost done. Property management companies, I think we've talked about this quite a bit. It's really hard to find like values aligned property management companies. We have a couple here. Common Good Management is national. Social Communities, I don't think is. But they are more mission driven, but also like something to keep in mind is even though these companies as a whole have a lot of different values that are like feel really helpful, they tend to hire people who have been managers, and those managers probably have experience at like these corporate properties where they're just trying to help the landlord get as much money as they want. So like it's hard to break out from that like power structure that's really harmful, to help managers understand that this is like their landlord are the residents, and so like they need to collaborate in a different way, um and yeah, have a different kind of power balance. And then yeah, but at Emma, they have their own management cooperative, which is really unique. And like, I don't know everything about Bodega Emma. I don't know if someone's on this call that is, I can't remember, but yeah, like I feel like there's a lot of lessons learned, yeah, from their model. And I think it's important to know that most of the communities, as far as I know, are pretty small relatively. Like we have parks here that are like 400, 500, 700 homes. So that's also why I think I'm trying to invest more time in becoming more of an expert. Like I'm not an expert by any means, but in cooperatives, that can be scaled up to this extent because that's just needed. These communities sometimes are huge. Then, sorry, I'm not looking at the chat. Okay, sweet. Okay, so rules and regulations are completely separate from leases, but they're tied together. And so there's very specific laws in Colorado that dictate what kind of rules can be imposed. And like, for example, you have to give a 60-day notice before imposing any rules. They have to be tied to the safety, health, and security of the residents. They can't be arbitrary. In a lot of instances, they can't be a new fee or cost unless there's a really good reason to do that. And then, so yeah, so it's good. It's again like tied to like why it's important to understand your laws, so that you're not like the residents aren't adopting things that are yeah, that are violations of the law, because that means that residents could sue you, right? And then like one recommendation is, you know, yearly maybe look at the rules and regulations of the park to have people voice concerns or amendments, but always doing it through a democratic process where there's like voting and also just a process of compliance to make sure that they actually comply with the law. Um, and then yeah, I this for next steps, I want to develop this more, just like case studies, and I do want to. So like yeah, but at Emma, like I got, they gave me some of the documents of like the governance documents that I'm still kind of looking into. Queen City Cooperative is like a mansion that's um that has like I think like 8 or 9 rooms. You to have a share, you have to commit to $10,000. And then you get 3% return on investment. So yeah, when you move, you get that money back and more. But yeah, so this is something I haven't that I want to continue to work on, but haven't had time yet. And I do want to include community land trusts. And like, yeah, Susan, just so you know, like if this is helpful to you, but I met with two other organizations that are working outside of Rock USA, so that we can get a sense of what those models have looked like outside of Rock, because we don't have an infrastructure for that here at all. And so I'm putting together a survey for every like housing authority, county, nonprofit that has created a resident owned community for mobile home parks. And I wanted to like also have that include eventually like tenant like apartments as well, so that we're like actually learning lessons from each other, because as far as I can tell, every org that's doing this outside of Rock, because of Rock can't like take it on or whatever, is just being scrappy as fuck. And like we're all scrappy organizations, we figure it out, but like sometimes it's like if we had more time to talk to each other or more structure, then maybe we could avoid some like mistakes that other organizations have had, or just like adopt best practices. So that's part of the case studies, is like actually doing an inventory of what all these models look like. Um, yeah, so I am like for next steps, I am gonna bring this presentation to this table we have that's like all real estate ownership, resident ownership. So it's like, yeah, I'm just letting you know, Susan, like for your own records, but it's like East Colfax Collective, GES Coalition, Elevation Land Trust, Neighborhood Development Collaborative. So like organizations that are already in this like place of doing resident ownership in different ways. Um, and yeah, and just like walking, like translating this and then like walking through with other with the parks I'm actually working with, but I want to flesh it out more, especially the financing side that I'm still learning. Yeah, that's that's what I got.
Let's come off mute and say thank you to Dre. Yay. Awesome. So we'll open it up for questions. Anyone who wants to jump in, questions and or I know Potter Emma came up quite a few times in the presentation. So if y'all want to share any of your perspectives as well, we'll open the floor. Go ahead, Susan.
Well, when you just were talking about elevations or other people besides USA, do you want like do you get the people from the cooperative itself, like the residents to reach out to them, or are you like sort of doing that yourself?
Like to do the inventory or
No, I
the,
mean just to reach out to them at all. Because I mean, I've got them going, like, you guys need to talk to Thistle. You need to set up a meeting with Rock USA. So would it be, should that be the way it always is? Like, if I think maybe Elevations Land Trust might be interested, should I be reaching out to them or should I be having the residents themselves, their co-op board or whatever, do that themselves?
um, yeah, I think as much as possible, if residents can do it themselves, I think that's always preferred. And like when, yeah, I've tried to do that. And then like I'm like, I can be an intermediary if that's helpful. And like I mean, yeah, I mean, Rock is pretty much the only one that has capacity right now, like Elevation, for example, doesn't. So like if when a park up goes up for sale though, like all of the same suspects are always like communicated with, sometimes like, you know, organizers like you, sometimes with the residents directly. But yeah, if as much as the residents can do, um, that's I think the best way to do it. Um, Carol, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to commend you and tell you to keep up the good work. I know you said you're learning, and I'm in the same space. I went to Savannah 2 weeks ago now, and around cooperatives. I can't think of the group. It's a national group, but when I could put it in the chat. But yeah, we all been learning and wanting to do this cooperative thing because um Susan, what a cooperative is, everybody shares in. And we've been trying to stress that everybody has to share in the decisions. And what I learned at the conference, that particular conference, um, there were so many people that already had their cooperative started, but they were really working how to keep it going. Like, I didn't even think that far because we haven't even got to where some of these folks have cooperatives like for 20 years. So they need new money to come in to keep them going, whether everybody needs a new roof or whatnot. The credit unions were very, very involved because they are a cooperative. Well, some are. And so I said, oh, yeah, that's right. Nothing lasts forever. And because of the way the economy and people's wages are, even living in a cooperative, trying to keep that affordable and everybody at the same pace and able to put in their same shares and so on and so on. I don't want to say it's difficult, but it was challenging listening to some of the groups that um have had these cooperatives for like more than 10 years, I would say, and really trying to keep them going and keep them standing. But yeah, that's good. I can't wait till we get our little thing together. I mean, we're getting there. But by the time we get the Ikes out, meaning the kinks, and it's kind of caught up right now for us in Pittsburgh around the land. And I know you mentioned community land trust, Susan, and we've been looking at ways that we can maybe secure the land and be owners. Because the problem for us, we definitely have tons of vacant land, right? That's all owned by the public, right? Well, the city and so on and so on. And we're trying to think of ways where even they would be willing to sell us that land for $1. Do you know what I mean? It just takes a lot. So yeah, all power to the people.
Awesome. Thank you, Carol. Um, And one other thing I would add, just like, especially when we're talking about public money or land, um, I'm working with this student who did her, I don't know what it is, maybe it's a capstone project for grad school.
Dissertation.
I think so, yeah, on mobile home parks here. And I asked her, and like Susan, I'll share with you because it's really helpful to have a updated report. The last one I saw was like pretty old. But she created this like 2-pager, how to talk to elected officials about investing in like community ownership and why. And I think one of the most important things is showing them like governments have done this before. And like it's not new. Like, and I'm sure you can find examples in like every state, to some extent, or even, yeah, like also like, yeah, you can invest in this like new sports arena, but like, why wouldn't you invest in resident ownership? So yeah, so I think having tools like that to talk to elected officials is really helpful. Something that's like pretty concise, like has like a list of like these are, examples where it's been done. This is why, um, is really, yeah, it can be really important. Because also, even though I know housing authorities can be pretty problematic, and people might be scared to have their park like assigning opportunity purchase or having a housing authority like retain the land, or even like, yeah, a city. Sometimes it's a good like transition solution. So maybe a city is more prepared to step in when a property goes up for sale to like buy it and hold it until there can be a resident transition. So that's also a strategy to think about. And that means like convincing elected officials ahead of time, like, you know, like you should consider doing this as a way to preserve affordable housing. Like Pitkin County, Susan, you probably know, but like they bought 5 parks like years ago, that have a lot of different models. So like, yeah, which is like a rural community here. And so like it's important to show it's not just like city of Denver, these expensive cities that have a big budget that are doing preservation efforts. Like there's examples in rural communities as well that have less resources. Yeah.
It's hard thinking about all this when they're also like, when, like the people at Mountainside, they have 120 days to create a co-op with all 232 houses, and then figure all this stuff out all at the same time.
I would say that like, I mean, that's indicative of like not having an infrastructure here. And I'm sure that's the case in a lot of places. So like when we're thinking about this, like how do we create the ecosystem? Because right now it literally feels like we need all the stars to align, right? It's like you need the organizing, you need the funding, you need the technical assistance, like you need all these pieces to like be happening. And like every time a park goes up for sale, a property goes up for sale, it's like mass chaos and panic. Like, um, so yeah, so like how do we create a more viable infrastructure that where it's not just like, oh, I just talked to this person that I happen to know, like, yeah, that's great. Let's use our connections. And how do we connect other like organizations and efforts to those same connections?
Thank you, Drain. Great questions, everybody. Well, Dre, I do have a question for you. If you could just speak a little bit about your personal journey to this work, and also this moment that we're in currently, economic and political moment, how that's impacted the work you're doing and how you're navigating it.
Yeah, I might have mentioned to some of you, like I started In 2014, when I worked with 9 to 5 Colorado, I was hired as a public transit organizer, but got pushed into yeah, working with mobile home parks when 2 parks shut down in Denver. And Montevista, the park I'm working with now, is actually the last mobile home park in that neighborhood. So kind of came full circle. But really that like kicked everything off. And I realized there's not legal support in mobile home parks. Our laws are horrible. There's not like organizations organizing mobile home parks. So that was back in 2014. So I would, it's really like night and day, like where we were at then and where we're at now is with like most of that change has become because of public awareness and residents sticking their necks out and like facing displacement, unfortunately. So yeah, so that I just like a lot of things in my life, I accidentally fell into it, just like I accidentally found these kittens. So just kind of going with the flow. But yeah, there's something else I was gonna say. Yeah.
So you want to speak to where you feel like the work is now? If there's any
Yeah,
particular challenges this moment's presenting you, how you're moving
yeah.
through.
I think this has always been clear, but more clear now. Um, like resident ownership is a way to disengage from like very hyper capitalist structures. Like it's so important. Like it was really interesting. So this fellowship culminated that I talked about um ended with this conference that we had in DC that was like a cooperative conference. And I remember there's this woman on the panel who was like, people think that cooperatives are about socialism and communism, and it's not. They're about capitalism. And all of us were like, what the fuck? Like, absolutely not. That's like, if anything, like more and more, I feel like younger generations too are interested in this work because it's uh, you know, a way to get away from capitalism or do things differently. And so a lot of people are pretty upset about that comment, including me. And I like was like, wow, you're wrong. Because like capitalism is about making the boss rich, right? Like it's not about equity, it's not about equality, it's not about like being valued for your work, it's about exploitation. And so I just think I hate it when people say not more than ever because it's always like that because like our society continues to get progressively worse politically. um, but I feel like I have I think these types of models like obviously they give me hope. Like, like this like we do have a solution. We've figured it out. And like part of why this cooperative fellowship has also been so inspiring is like specifically learning about the South and cooperatives that were created for farmers, Black farmers specifically, that were created by and for like Black folks who like that was the alternative because like capitalism 100% left them out was not, you know, was like built on the backs of slaves. And so like I think it's been like people have done what they have to do to survive, and this is a huge part of what that looks like. And it's been happening way longer than than we I think realized, so that gives me hope.
You, Dre. Much needed.
I have a question. Dre, a few of our groups in the MHP working group are like at the very beginning of like creating a kind of like official group with folks. I'm thinking specifically about a park that is up for sale in Miami, that the Miami Worker Center is working with. And the organizers just been having like a lot of problems with the folks that, the tenant leaders, in a lot of problems between them and even just, problematic behavior, just to be very vague about it. I guess I'm just like wondering what how you navigated that. And I heard you mention earlier that kind of like starting with the board, which is really awesome. I hadn't heard that before, to like build it and just have it, was one way. And I'm just wondering if you can expand more on that.
Yeah. And like the only board I've ever helped build was mostly men, was Montevista. And that has never happened. And I hope it never happens again, to be honest. Like, just like women of color just tend to be more like thinking about the things that like they're not included in, or like making spaces included. Um, and so like, for example, like people might not think about needing childcare if you don't have kids. But like women of color who are like, with their families, like they're gonna think about that. Like, so I feel like having people who are the most marginalized be leading is like very real. Like that's going to make a much more successful community. The board for Monte Vista got kind of created like out of urgency because the park went up for sale. But I like try to be more intentional with like developing leaders that like might be like, I'm not a leader, and like, making sure that people know like being a leader doesn't mean you're the loudest. It doesn't mean like you're the most financially savvy. Like none of those things like equates to automatically being a good leader. And so being really intentional about identifying those folks and working with them instead of like, yeah, and maybe like the most outspoken people. Like I've worked really hard to like not to keep this person. I know this sounds messed up, maybe, but like for the mobile home park in the mountains between 20 homes, there's this woman who's like very racist. Like she like against like undocumented folks. But she thinks she's the smartest person. And I've like been really intentional about being like, okay, maybe not, maybe you're not like so yeah, it's like yeah, we're not here to dictate decisions, and we're organizers are here to like be like, this is what I've learned, like this is what I've seen over time. And but also like, okay, two other things really quick. One, not every community is going to succeed, and like I think sometimes we as organizers, like we don't want to give up, right? We want to like um hang on to every like it's hard to give up. Like if you committed to a community, and something I've been thinking about, like sometimes it's not, it's gonna fizzle out, it doesn't build traction. Like if residents aren't prepared to some extent to take on this project, like you can't, like it's not, everything is not like on you. And if like, you really have to gauge like, okay, is this like a small minority of people who are causing these problems? Or is it the majority? Like with Monte Vista, it's like 5 families, and then there's 76 families. So I'm like, I'm focusing my time on those people, like, and helping them with their leadership development, but also keeping them engaged and not like falling into despair, like because of this group of people that is like causing the problems, because there are always going to be those people that they want conflict, they don't actually want to understand what's happening. But yeah, it's a hard balance. And I think but like being real with people of like, this is gonna work, right? Like if you guys don't do these things, this is not gonna, it's not gonna be successful. Like even like a park went up for sale for $170 million recently. Like I know that's a different example, but it's like we're just real with them. Like there's no way. There's no way. But are you interested in making sure in this city, Thornton, that other parks that are more affordable don't go through this process? So yeah, like I'm doing a tenant organizing training tomorrow, but one thing that I talk about is like how to assess if this is possible. Do you have at least 5 solid members that are willing to carry out this work? If you don't, be like, let me know when you do, like I think those are fair things to ask from leaders, to also not create this dynamic of like everything is like all the work has to fall on the organizer. That's just not sustainable. Susan?
Well, when you say $170 million price tag, like, has there been a case where you can show someone like when these sale prices are so absurdly high that they don't make any sense? Um, can you like say this, no one's gonna buy this park at this price. You should just put in a lower offer, or is that not a good idea? Or I don't know. I guess I'm just curious about this because of Mountainside.
I mean, it's not like when you put in an offer, you usually have to put some sort of deposit down that's like non-refundable. So it's like pretty like risky. Like I know like sometimes that's like 20, 30 more thousand or more. Um, I think like with the opportunity purchase law, the landlord has to be transparent if there is an offer on the table. So if there is, like, if there isn't, maybe wait until they like decrease the amount. But then like another thing to think about in that park, like, what would help these parks or these properties from not being that fucking expensive? Rent control, right? Like if rent control was passed, landlords wouldn't be as interested in buying these they are only interested because they can double the price
Rent, yeah.
and like that, like this is why our stupid ass governor, I hate him so much, is like he like threatened to veto a bill back in 2022 or 2023 that had rent control set at 3.5% max a year to like for an increase. If that had passed, we just wouldn't be here with like $60 million, $170 million. And so that's another thing I'm working with this grad student on is like, can we actually like also document all these parks that have been sold to corporate landlords? How much do they go for and what happened? Like how much
How much
their rent?
higher, yeah, how much higher their rents are,
That's,
Jared,
yeah,
and presented to our next governor.
yeah. So I mean, that's all to say that like, you know, there's not always next steps, but if people want to continue and like with their leadership and be more involved, there are ways to plug like what is happening at this micro level, to connect it to the macro level. Like what can we do now that will actually change the fate of future communities? Even if it means like I'm not gonna benefit, right? Like, but I am always shocked in the best way possible at how many people are like, I will still do this for my future communities, like my peers, like more people will want to do that more often than maybe you would think. So giving them that opportunity and guidance is really
That's
important.
where I came from.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Susan. Like
Our attempt to purchase our park failed thanks to bad, terrible landlord who was doing, wasn't above board, wasn't, treating us right, was trying to figure out how to get around that new opportunity to purchase law and just messed with us. And I had spent all that time trying to get all my neighbors organized and worked with Rock USA and went through the whole thing and had the meetings after meetings after meetings and did all the stuff. And it all fell apart and became like an extreme frustration, so that's how I wound up here in the first place, was like, now what can we do?
yeah. Yeah, Luz Galicia, who works at 9 to 5, like her park shut down, and now she's like, I'm gonna do everything I can so this doesn't happen, that doesn't continue to happen like that.
Yep.
Dre, do you have questions for the group that you'd like to ask?
I guess like as, you know, this is a living presentation that I, you know, want to cater to different groups, or what's missing, or like what would be helpful to like embellish on, or like build off of, that's like mentioned, that would give like more clarity or be helpful to use to present to residents or like whoever.
Maybe the social justice piece, which you explained that very well, that cooperatives, um, this is nothing new, right? And so to get people to be a believer, you got to kind of always take them back down memory lane so that they can realize that, oh, okay, um, yeah, my great grandma was a sharecropper, meaning connected to the farms, or this person was connected to what is it? Like a newspaper or whatnot, and like family businesses, in particular when there was a lot of segregation. And segregation, people don't realize too that it speaks more to race. It kind of speaks to class, like low, medium, like now where we hear low income, medium income, but um if you're in a low income neighborhood, well, you belong there. You're going to make the best of it. So just putting that whole spin on the social justice piece and how it is an opportunity to correct history. And like you already explained it. So, and then, cooperatives aren't for everyone. I realized that mainly because look at our world. Do people work together cooperatively? No. But the ones that can come together in particular and work on something that's going to be better, I think once people see, oh, they're really working together. Because even going back to
Well, let's,
tenants, um,
sorry.
oh, okay. Yeah, because even going back to the question of tenants, we organize tenants, and I finally realized something. Okay, tenants be lying to us, right? They, I mean, I wouldn't go to a court, but some of them have really done some damages, right? And we're advocates, and we go, right, and, make a stand for them. But we wouldn't put nobody out there on blast. But I had to learn too that, oh, it's almost like a lawyer and client relationship. So I learned to say, hey, if you need me to help you, you need to be honest with me about every little thing. Not every little thing, but you need to be honest with me before we go into this courtroom, right? And then I'm looking like, oh, well, who is she? This person then they're the terrorists of the whole building or the whole little community, right? But I'm not knowing this, but I'm just saying when you can find people that could work cooperatively together, it's wonderful. But everybody's not going to be able to work cooperatively because they're human and that's just who they are.
Yeah, I love that, Carol.
Mhm. Look, I would be going in courtrooms saying this and that, advocating for them. Didn't even know that person was the terrorist of the community. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm standing up. But, that's a human. That's how humans are. But I have to learn to protect myself better, and I do now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm definitely gonna take notes of like, yeah, social justice history, being real about like expectations, and then I think even like once you learn about cooperatives, then you realize they are everywhere. Like all the snacks we had through the conference was like Tillamook cheese and like what was it? These almonds, like these big companies that you wouldn't even know are cooperatives to point out like you're saying, like making people believers, like actually this is a huge part of our economy, but people don't know. Like most people don't know that credit unions are cooperatives. Like so I
Okay.
think yeah, making those things visible that like are kind of invisible unless you are in like you drank the Kool-Aid or whatever the hell you want to call it. Like, so yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
And one more thing, I'm learning just last week, I'm learning too, even though we want cooperative housing, but I'm learning to say cooperative enterprises. So then that includes the conversation for the credit union and what's that H hardware or something. I didn't realize they were a cooperative. I said, oh, I never knew that. You know what I mean? And some kind of butter company. So just cooperative enterprises kind of speaks to all that without trying to listen. I'm like, at least I'll get one right. Ace Hardware or somewhere, something.
Yeah, ACEs, yeah, it is. It's a
See,
co-op.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carol. Susan, go ahead, please.
Oh, well, I just, I've been trying to get people in parks to organize ahead of time, so that if they get the opportunity to purchase, they are ready for it. And everything, what I keep bringing up to people in the parks, as a reason to have a cooperative other than, even if you never get a chance to buy the park and become cooperatively owned, it's helpful when everyone is actually talking to each other and sharing the sort of law breaking activity of their landlords. At Mountainside, I discovered they are telling tenants they don't accept Section 8 vouchers as a rent payment. This is something I already went through in my own cooperative in my neighborhood when one of the members told me, I finally won that Section 8 lottery and I went to pay my rent and the landlord said we don't take Section 8. I got all the legal paperwork together and made said that's illegal. The landlord is not allowed to refuse Section 8 as a rent payment. And that never would have happened if I didn't have the cooperative and didn't have the communication amongst all the residents. So I feel like that's very important to have people actually talking to each other, and they don't really do it until they have some kind of either the residents association or the cooperative, and it really helps even beyond just owning their parks.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Good stuff. There's also a few things that were dropped in the chat. So I dropped in the chat, Dre definitely suggests showing a short video of people who live in a cooperative talking about their experiences. I dropped an example from Square One Villages that presented last month, which has a really good 5-minute video about the residents, basically talking about how challenging but rewarding it has been to like live together and like work together to run the cooperative. Um, and Daisy put in the chat, I like to connect cooperatives to our cultural practices. It reminds folks that we come from these practices already. So definitely resonating with what others have said. And I did also want to offer up one more resource. I know, Dre, we've talked in the past and you've suggested the idea of working through conflict. There's a recent podcast I listened to from The Anxious Achiever that's all about conflict. It's an interview with Amy Gallo, who wrote a book called Getting Along, which is about getting along with some of the common archetypes of most like challenging things that we can represent sometimes when we're in conflict or what others can. So I definitely recommend. Podcast's only like 40 minutes, so I think it's like a really good, maybe even like workshop primer if you're working with people to get thinking about how do you talk about conflict in a way that's positive and collaborative. Um, and also, if you haven't signed up yet, there's a link to where we got the recordings from our past sessions that's on the Mighty Network that we set up. So, are there any other final words, Dre, or others want to share? Well, let's all thank Dre one more time
Thank you, Trey.
and hope you heal up really soon.
You look really tough though. There's that.
I'm like, I look like Zuko from the last Airbender, It's like has a fight. I don't know. Gotta lean into my injuries. It's fine.
Glad you're
Good.
feeling better.